The humanitarian crisis in Ethiopia's Tigray region is showing no signs of improving, with 2.3 million people in need of aid due to widespread violence and also the spread of coronavirus. The Ethiopian army says it's killed and arrested more leaders of the Tigray People's Liberation Front. Associate Professor Atakalti Hailu has been closely watching the developments in his home country, and he joins us now live from Perth. Very good evening to you. What are your main concerns as you watch what's going on in Ethiopia?
Thank you. Well, the main concern right now is about the humanitarian crisis. It's getting serious by the day. It's over 66 days since the war began. The government calls it a law and enforcement operation, but this is a war involving armies from two countries and other states. And it has been a war that has come into the province in 5-6 directions. There is a complete communications blackout, no communication, no transportation, no media allowed. So we don't know what's happening. Most people who are outside don't know what has happened to their families. And every day the news that comes in other forms other than by direct contact is always worrying and bad. And every day it gets worse. There has not been any good news coming out of Tigray for the last 66 days. And people have been displaced internally. Estimates run between 200 or 100,000 up to 2 million. And as he said, the UN and the UNICEF and other agencies have been claiming or reporting that there are millions that are going to starve. And 5 days ago, the UN came out with a report, and it says 4.3 or so million people have difficult accessing food. And this is just in terms of what's happening in terms of life sustenance, food and so on. There is no water, there is no power, there is a lot of violence and rape, and these have all been admitted by Ethiopian federal officers in the last 1 week and before that. And this is worrying, and the world doesn't know what's happening, and the UN has been asking for access. It said it had access for humanitarian deliveries a month ago. Nothing has happened, almost nothing, very limited.
Atakalti, there are strong Ethiopian communities both where you are in Perth and in Melbourne as well, many parts of Australia. And there have been protests to try and raise awareness of what's happening to family, friends who are caught up in this conflict. Is there anything that the international governments can do?
Yes, there is. And what they need to do is first get the government to accept what the European Union and the United Nations bodies have been asking for. And they have been asking for observers to go in, for there to be humanitarian access, not to just areas that the government controls, but all areas, because the government doesn't control all the areas. So there needs to be access to all parts of Tigray, and there needs to be an investigation into what has happened by an independent body in terms of the massacres that have occurred and other sorts of crimes like war crimes. The infrastructure in the state has been destroyed, factories have been destroyed, schools are being attacked, hospitals have been looted and destroyed. This is not a war that's not even in the standard form of a war. This is a genocide, and it's meant to harm the state, not just for now, not just for next year, but for years and years to come. And this is happening with the world watching by the federal government, by troops from other states, and by Eritrean forces. It's no longer a guess that Eritrean forces are in Tigray. It's already confirmed by Ethiopian military officers themselves.
Yeah. Why do you think then that, as you say, it's gone on for such a long time now? I mean, are there any signs of compromise? Any signs of there some resolution?
There hasn't been any, and I mean, for any normal person who has been following crisis and wars in other places, you would think that at some point either the international bodies or other bodies would get these governments to talk. But what has happened is there is no avenue for dialogue. The government has said the elected state government for Tigray, which is a TPLF, Tigrayan People's Liberation Front, is an outlaw. And because it had an election in September, while the federal government wanted to postpone and is not elected and has run out of time, it's an illegitimate government. It's not an elected prime minister. He is an appointed prime minister. And now they have called the regional government an outlaw, a junta or a junta, and they have mobilized parts of the country against the people of Tigray.
Yeah.
And there is no avenue for dialogue, and the way they have closed the avenue for dialogue is by calling this a law and enforcement operation. But there is no law and enforcement operation that involves 500,000 soldiers. We have never seen that. Okay, and that's what. And it seems unless the United Nations Security Council acts, unless leaders around the world get the United Nations Security Council to act and to ask the Ethiopian government to first allow humanitarian access. That's the most important thing. Now, we are not even talking about the politics. It's too late for the politics. Right now, we are talking about people dying, people suffering in all sorts of ways. And there are crimes being committed in Tigray that are difficult to repeat. And what we want is the world to allow humanitarian access, to allow observers, and to then ask for de-escalation or a ceasefire, and eventually for an investigation and a dialogue. But immediately, we want the people to survive. Whoever is under hardship now to be helped, and that's not 100,000, that's not 200,000. We are talking about 2.3 million children and 4.5 or so million people.